pass and did ratify the Constitution, but it was only by 8 votes.
And what's interesting, that him vociferously demanding a Bill of Rights, I would think that the other founders wouldn't be against it, but would his view be that if we do not make it clear and explicit, then those who come after us will violate this? So we have to make it absolutely clear that this is here and not just let it be assumed that it will be carried out well? Or did he think about it in some different reason for wanting a Bill of Rights?
No, you're exactly right. Both Washington and Madison thought that a Bill of Rights was superfluous, that anything not in the Constitution was assumed to be either a state's rights or a natural rights. Mason absolutely objected to that. He said he wanted a document to enumerate these Bill of Rights, these civil rights, these natural rights, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom to be safe in your homes from unreasonable search and seizures. He wanted a document and absolutely called for a document enumerating these rights, and ultimately he convinced Madison and Washington to his thinking, and the Bill of Rights was eventually adopted about a year before he died in 1791.
Well, let's take Mason into the 21st century and see how you think he would interpret things. So you mentioned one of the most important individual rights was a free press. In the tech duopoly, oligopolies that exist today, what do you think he would comment on with the state of the press in the 21st century?
I think he generally would be favorable to it, but the newest news about Facebook, deleting certain accounts and deleting what they call unfriendly or unfavorable comments, I think he would be absolutely against. I think he would think that that is a restraint on the press, because he called freedom of the press one of the greatest bulwarks of liberty and can never be restrained but by a despotic government. He also wrote what became the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And he believed it was not only the right of a militia to have arms, but the body of the people, because he actually wrote that the well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. So he basically wrote our most individual, most important freedoms in his document that eventually became the Bill of Rights.
And this is something where I'd love to get into the mind of, in someone in the 18th century talking about the owning of firearms as a free state. What do you think would be all the meanings of that? Just because this is something that's adjudicated endlessly in the media and by legal professionals, is that in the sense of tyranny by their government for personal home defense? You could be attacked by raids, attacked by neighbors. There's all sorts of different meanings. What are some of the different meanings that you've come across in your research when he uses that language?
He was very, very afraid that the presidency defined in the Constitution was going to be so powerful that it was going to lead an individual to be like a monarch, to be an aristocracy, to be a political dictatorship, just like George III that they had just broken off from. So he believed that the right to bear arms was not only for a well-regulated militia, but necessary for the body of the people in case the government tried to restrain these individual liberties. You'll have to remember that, Britain actually quartered some of their soldiers in the houses before the Revolution, and that was one of the reasons the colonists really objected to this. So he was a huge believer in self-defense against tyranny and against an aristocracy.
Were there any findings that surprised you about him in your research? And my favorite type of surprises are things that you can't quite make sense out of, or you scratch your head and think, oh, that's weird. I don't really know how to explain that, just because it shows sort of sometimes the exoticness of what history can be. Were there any surprises that you found?
Well, several surprises. One, I had no idea that he had 12 children at the time, but I had no idea that he actually coined the most important words really in the Declaration of Independence were his words originally: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those were his words that he wrote a month before Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Also, the impeachment clause for impeaching a president, he put in the actual words high crimes and misdemeanors into the impeachment clause in the Constitution. He also added the definition of treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. These were all George Mason's original words, which just are astounding because you think they're credited to other founders, but they're actually George Mason's original words.
Hey everyone, Scott here. We're going to take a very short break for a word from our sponsors.
Overall, what would you say are things that should be remembered from George Mason that you think would be most beneficial for people to remember today?
Well, I really think, and I hope my book makes the historical case, that really George Mason should be fully credited with the original draft of what ultimately became the famed Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. You know, one can argue that Jefferson and Madison kind of pruned and edited Mason's words, but Mason really wrote these famous words. And he's sort of been consigned to the second tier of history. But I think, and I hope my book proves, that he really should be in the same conversation as Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton as one of the most important founding fathers of our country.
All right. If you can get a musical based on his life, too, that will really kick him up into the upper echelon. So I don't know if you have theater experiments or can score any music.
Not sure of a Hamilton, but maybe there's a good play in there somewhere.
Yeah, I have to ask this, I guess, since we're sort of on the topic. The musical, I have not seen it. I have huge pop cultural blind spots in some areas. What was your take when that came out, there was a musical? Were you thought, okay, that's great, interested in founding fathers, or were you mystified, or like, why Hamilton of all people, or what was your take?
I was a little shocked. Hamilton wasn't the first character that I would have drawn on as far as moral character, but it was interesting, and I heard the music was very, very dynamic and good. So anything that gets people interested in history, I'm all in favor of.
All right, Mason is the next step in line, so we'll get going that way. But all right, well, the book is George Mason, the Founding Father Who Gave Us the Bill of Rights. William, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for having me.
So that is the episode for today. As always, I want to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, especially our spy masters, Bill Ivey, Joyce Normant, Tyler from Colorado, Josh Reddick, Baron Fraser, Chris from Maine, Carl from Norway, Moondoggy from Ohio, Rick Knowlton, Vic and Irene, Mike from New York, Michelle, and Marlene. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you like the show and want to help it grow, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, like and subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice. This helps spread the word about the show. 2, join our Facebook group. Here we can keep the discussion going about new episodes, and you can talk about what you like and didn't like. And you can find this group if you just search for History Unplugged on Facebook. 3, we have an online store with t-shirts, phone covers, and other accessories featuring awesomely bad history puns that were crowdsourced by you, the audience. And you can find that if you go to tpublic, public.com and look for History Unplugged, or you just go to historyonthenet.com and look for our store there. 4, and this is really the best way to dive deep with History Unplugged, and that's to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you know your American history, you know the Knowlton's Rangers were an elite spy and reconnaissance group in the American Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the membership program of History Unplugged. You can join at 3 levels. If you join at the level of Scout, you can hear all the episodes of History Unplugged completely ad-free and get early access to new episodes, at least a week early. If you join at the Intelligence Officer level, you get special bonus episodes, like a 10-part series on the World War II hero Audie Murphy, a multi-part series called Ottoman Lives about different people in the Ottoman Empire, and a series called Rendezvous with Death that looks at biographical profiles of Americans who went to fight in World War I before America entered the war. The last level is Spy Master, where you get all that stuff, but you also get 3 hardcover history books, Forging a President, How the Wild West Created Teddy Roosevelt, Race to the Top of the World, Richard Byrd and the First Flight to the North Pole, and The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Another bonus is, you can choose a history topic for me to focus on for an entire episode that can go up to an hour, and I'll answer whatever question you have for me. and you get a shout out at the end of each episode. If you want to learn how to become a member of the Knowlton's Rangers, go to patreon.com/unplugged. That's patreon.com/unplugged. All right, well, that is all for my spiel. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast, from ancient Greece to the Cold War and everything else in between. See you next time.